The diplomatic vessel USS Horizon glided silently through space, its sleek hull reflecting the distant starlight as it approached the massive Imperial station orbiting Nexus Prime. Commander Lisa Martinez stood at the observation deck, her dark eyes fixed on the imposing structure ahead. The year was 2157, and humanity had been a part of the Galactic Empire for only 15 years, a mere infant compared to the ancient species that ruled the stars. Quite a sight, isn't it? Captain Eric Johnson moved to stand beside her, his weathered face showing signs of concern despite his attempt at casual conversation. Lisa nodded. Magnificent and terrifying at the same time. She turned to face her captain, lowering her voice. "Did you review the files I sent?" Eric's expression darkened. "I did. If what you found is true, we have a serious problem." The files in question were classified Imperial medical records that Lisa had gained access to through means she preferred not to discuss openly. The documents strongly suggested that the Empire had been using human colonies on the Outer Rim for bioweapon testing, disguising the experiments as medical aid programs. "Ambassador Davidson needs to see these before the summit meeting," Lisa said firmly. "The Empire cannot be allowed to treat humans like lab animals." The ship docked with precision at the Imperial station. As the human delegation prepared to disembark, Lisa noticed her protege, Junior Communications Officer Amy Peterson, checking her equipment with unusual thoroughness. "Everything okay, Amy?" Lisa asked, approaching the young woman. Amy smiled, her blonde hair neatly tied back, her uniform crisp and perfect. "Just making sure all channels are secure, Commander. This is my first major diplomatic mission and I don't want to mess anything up." Lisa placed a reassuring hand on Amy's shoulder. "You'll do fine, just remember to keep recording everything. Even the things they tell you not to." Amy nodded, her blue eyes serious. "Yes, ma'am." The Imperial reception hall was vast, with ceilings that stretched so high they disappeared into shadow. The architecture was designed to make visitors feel small and insignificant, a psychological tactic not lost on the human delegation. Representatives from dozens of species filled the hall, but the humans were noticeably separated, guided to a position far from the central dais where the Imperial leaders would speak. Ambassador Keith Davidson, a tall man with graying hair and a naturally commanding presence, kept his diplomatic smile firmly in place despite the obvious slight. Lisa handed him a small data drive discreetly as they walked. "Review this before you speak," she whispered. "It changes everything." Davidson's smile never faltered, but his eyes showed he understood the seriousness of her message. Lord Vexus Therian, the Imperial representative assigned to Earth, approached the human delegation. His species resembled humanoids with scaled skin the color of burnished gold and eyes with vertical pupils. He wore elaborate robes that signified his high status within the Empire. "Ambassador Davidson," Vexus Therian said, his voice carrying the typical Imperial accent that made him sound perpetually condescending. "I trust your journey was pleasant. We have assigned you quarters in the outer section, suitable for your species' comfort needs." "Thank you, Lord Vexus Therian," Davidson replied smoothly. "Before we settle in, I wonder if we might discuss some concerning reports from our outer colonies." Vexus Therian's scales shifted color slightly, a sign of irritation that the humans had learned to recognize. "The summit agenda has already been set, Ambassador. Your concerns can be filed through proper channels." Lisa stepped forward. "With respect, Lord Vex Therian, evidence of bioweapon testing on civilian populations warrants immediate attention." A hush fell over the nearby delegates. Vexus Therian's scales now flushed a deep red as his eyes narrowed to slits. "Commander Martinez, you forget your place," he hissed. "Humans have been granted the privilege of Imperial protection. You would do well to show gratitude rather than spreading baseless accusations." Captain Johnson moved to stand beside Lisa. "These accusations are not baseless. We have documentation." Amy Peterson, following protocol, had her communication device active, recording the exchange. She stood slightly behind the main delegation, but her equipment was visible to the increasingly agitated Imperial Lord. "Is that device active?" Vexus Therian suddenly demanded, pointing at Amy. Recording without Imperial permission is forbidden. This is a diplomatic meeting, Lisa countered. We have every right to maintain our own records. Vexus Therian's face contorted with rage. You primitive species need to be reminded of your status in this empire. He turned to his guards. Make an example of this insolence. Before anyone could react, one of the Imperial guards raised a ceremonial energy weapon and fired directly at Amy Peterson. The blue beam struck her chest, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. Amy's eyes widened in shock, her mouth forming a silent "oh" before she collapsed to the floor within. Johnson immediately dropped to Amy's side while Lisa and the other human officers drew their sidearms, ceremonial weapons that they had never expected to use. "Stand down!" Ambassador Davidson shouted, his diplomatic facade shattered by shock and rage. "What have you done?" Vexus Therian looked at Amy's body with complete indifference. "Discipline, something your species clearly needs to learn." Lisa checked Amy's pulse with trembling hands but found nothing. The young woman's eyes stared sightlessly at the ornate ceiling far above. "She's dead," Lisa whispered, her voice breaking. "You killed her." "She was violating Imperial protocol," Vex Therian stated flatly. The consequences were clear. What the Imperial Lord failed to realize was that Amy's comm device was still active and broadcasting. Across human space, millions were witnessing the callous execution of a young officer whose only crime was doing her duty. Captain Johnson stood slowly, his face ashen. "This is an act of war." Vexus Therian laughed, the sound like stones grinding together. "War? Your species can barely travel between your own planets. The Empire has ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. Know your place, human." Ambassador Davidson had gone completely still, his diplomatic training at war with the fury building inside him. "We're leaving," he finally said. "And we're taking Amy with us." "As you wish," Vexus Therian said dismissively. "Perhaps this will teach humanity the proper respect." As the human delegation carefully lifted Amy's body, Lisa Martinez looked directly at Vexus Therian. "You've made a terrible mistake. Humans don't respond well to threats." "Is that so?" The Imperial Lord seemed amused. "What could your tiny civilization possibly do to the Galactic Empire?" Lisa didn't answer. There was no point explaining to a being as arrogant as Vexus Therian that throughout human history, nothing united their fractious species faster than a common enemy. Nothing motivated them more than injustice. And nothing, absolutely nothing, would stop them from seeking retribution for the life so carelessly extinguished before them. As the USS Horizon broke away from the Imperial Station, carrying its grieving crew and the body of Amy Peterson, millions of humans across the colonies and on Earth watched the recording of her death. In living rooms and military bases, in colonial outposts and mining stations, the same cold anger took hold. The Empire had existed for 10,000 years. It had conquered countless species and ruled a million worlds. But it had never faced humans, at war, and it had never killed one of their own in front of billions of witnesses. The Empire's mistake wasn't just killing Amy Peterson. Its mistake was thinking there would be no consequences. The USS Horizon returned to Earth 7 days after Amy Peterson's death. 7 days during which the footage of her killing spread across every human colony and settlement. 7 days that changed everything. Admiral Susan Wright watched the ship dock from the window of her office at Earth Defense Fleet headquarters. Her uniform was perfectly pressed, her gray hair cut in a practical style that hadn't changed in 20 years. But today her normally calm expression was tight with controlled anger. "They're here, Madam President," she said into her comm device. "President," Ryan Carter's voice came through clearly. "I'll meet you in the Situation Room. Make sure the Peterson family is comfortable in the waiting area. They deserve answers before anyone else." The Situation Room was located deep within Earth's military command center. It was designed to be impervious to any surveillance, with technology that scrambled even the most advanced Imperial scanning devices. Around the large central table sat the 12 people who would decide humanity's response to an act of Imperial cruelty that had united Earth and its colonies like nothing before. President Carter entered last. She was a tall woman with dark skin and short black hair streaked with silver. The weight of leadership showed in the lines around her eyes, deeper now than a week ago. "Let's begin," she said, taking her seat. "Captain Johnson, please report." Eric. Johnson stood, his uniform still bearing the journey's wrinkles. "Madam President, members of the Council, the recording you've all seen is completely accurate. Junior Communications Officer Amy Peterson was killed for simply doing her job. The Imperial representative showed no remorse. In fact, he considered it a form of discipline appropriate for our species." John Peterson sat silently at the far end of the table. Amy's father was not supposed to be part of this meeting, but no one had the heart to exclude him. His hands were folded tightly in front of him, knuckles white. "What was the Imperial response when you left the station?" General Alan Simmons asked. He led Earth's ground forces, and his mind was already calculating what would be needed if this turned to war. "Lord Vexitharian issued what he called a final warning to remember our place in the Empire," Captain Johnson replied. 2 hours after we departed, we received an official communication from the Imperial Diplomatic Corps, expressing regret for the unfortunate incident, but stating that Amy had violated clear protocols and the response was regrettably necessary. John Peterson made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. President Carter gave him a sympathetic glance before continuing the meeting. "Admiral Wright, what are our military options?" Admiral Wright tapped her tablet, and a holographic display appeared above the table showing the position of human colonies relative to Imperial space. "We are outgunned, outmanned, and surrounded," she said bluntly. "The Empire has technology centuries beyond ours and controls millions of worlds to our dozens. In a conventional war, we would be crushed within weeks." General Simmons nodded grimly. "Our ground forces could put up resistance on Earth and the major colonies, but we couldn't hold out against orbital bombardment." A heavy silence fell over the room. Then a quiet voice spoke up. "They're not as advanced as they want us to believe." All eyes turned to Dr. Olivia Moore. She was the youngest person at the table, a brilliant scientist who had been studying Imperial technology since first contact. "Explain," President Carter said. Dr. Moore stood and adjusted her glasses. "The Empire hasn't truly innovated in over 1,000 years. They've grown complacent. Their technology seems advanced to us, but it's actually stagnated. For example, their shield systems all operate on the same frequency patterns. They've never needed to adapt because no one has challenged them successfully." She tapped her own tablet, and the holographic display changed to show technical schematics. "Furthermore, I've identified 3 critical weaknesses in their communications network, their power distribution systems, and their weapons targeting arrays." John Peterson leaned forward, his engineering mind already seeing the possibilities. "You're saying we could exploit these weaknesses?" "Yes," Dr. Moore said simply. "But we would need to act before they realize we've discovered them." Admiral Wright studied the schematics with new interest. "I've been overseeing a classified weapons development program for the past 5 years. We've been reverse engineering Imperial technology while adding human innovations they'd never expect." "How effective would these weapons be?" President Carter asked. "Effective enough to make them notice," Admiral Wright replied. "Effective enough to hurt them." The meeting continued for hours as they discussed options, strategies, and consequences. Eventually, President Carter stood and looked at each person in turn. "I was elected to lead humanity to a peaceful future among the stars," she said quietly. "I never wanted to be a wartime president, but we cannot allow the Empire to treat human lives as worthless." She turned to John Peterson. "Mr. Peterson, I know nothing will bring Amy back, but I promise you her death will not be meaningless." "John." Peterson stood shakily. "My daughter believed in diplomacy, she believed in peace, but she also believed in standing up for what's right. Do what you must, Madam President." After John left, President Carter turned to her advisors. "Prepare our response. Military, diplomatic, economic, everything. The Empire needs to understand that humans are not to be trifled with." 3 days later, President Carter addressed all of humanity from the United Earth Government headquarters. The broadcast reached every human settlement, from the crowded cities of Earth to the smallest mining outpost in the outer colonies. "Citizens of Earth and her colonies," she began, her voice steady and determined. "1 week ago, we all witnessed an act of imperial cruelty that cannot stand unchallenged. Junior Communications Officer Amy Peterson was murdered by Imperial forces while performing her duty with honor and dignity." The President paused, letting the words sink in. "I have attempted to communicate with the Imperial leadership, demanding justice and reparations. Their response was clear. They consider us a lesser species, one whose lives can be taken without consequence." The camera zoomed in on her face, showing her resolve. "Today, I have signed an executive order officially withdrawing humanity from the Galactic Empire. Additionally, I have authorized our military forces to implement Operation Guardian Shield, effective immediately." What the broadcast didn't show was what Operation Guardian Shield truly meant. In deep space, human ships were already moving into position. On secret bases, weapons that combined human ingenuity with stolen Imperial technology were being loaded onto stealth vessels. Dr. Moore's findings were being weaponized, and Admiral Wright's secret fleet was preparing for its first mission on Dor. The Imperial capital. The Emperor's advisors brought news of Earth's withdrawal with amusement rather than concern. Lord Vexitharion laughed when he heard. "Let the primitives have their tantrum," he said dismissively. "When their colonies begin to starve without Imperial supply chains, they will come crawling back." What the Empire didn't know was that humans had been preparing for this possibility since they first encountered the vast galactic civilization. They didn't know about the hidden factories, the stockpiled resources, or the battle plans drawn up by generals who never fully trusted their new allies. Most importantly, they didn't know that humans throughout their bloody history had become very, very good at war, and they were about to learn. The stealth vessel. Vengeance drifted silently through the darkness of space, its experimental hull absorbing sensor sweeps rather than reflecting them. From the outside, it was nearly invisible against the black backdrop of stars. Inside, Commander Greg Wilson studied the holographic display of the Imperial border outpost they were approaching. "Time to target?" he asked quietly, as if the enemy might hear them through the vacuum of space. Lieutenant Maria Sanchez checked her instruments. 17 minutes, sir. We remain undetected." Greg nodded, his expression grim. 1 month had passed since Amy Peterson's death, and Operation First Light was about to begin. The first coordinated human strike against the Galactic Empire in history. "All stations, final checks," Greg ordered. "Engineer Rodriguez, status on the new weapon systems?" Paul Rodriguez's voice came through the comm from the engine room. "All green, Commander. The phase shifters are calibrated exactly as Dr. Moore specified. If her calculations are correct, the Imperial shields won't know what hit them." Greg hoped she was right. The entire operation depended on the Imperial weakness Dr. Moore had discovered. Their shield systems operated on predictable frequency patterns that hadn't been updated in centuries. Human engineers had designed weapons that could shift phases rapidly, slipping through the tiny gaps in those patterns. "Intelligence update from Officer Baker," Maria announced, reading from her screen. "Imperial Governor Zarketh has arrived at the outpost for inspection. All high-ranking officials are now present at the target." Greg felt a chill run down his spine. Sam Baker had been their inside man, a human spy who had been feeding them information for months. If his intelligence was accurate, they were about to strike not just any Imperial outpost, but one currently housing the overseer of the entire sector. "Looks like we get to send our message to someone who matters," Greg said. "Prepare main weapons, launch strike teams on my mark." The next few minutes passed in tense silence as the Vengeance approached its target. The Imperial outpost grew larger. On their screens, a massive structure of gleaming metal with docking arms extending outward like the legs of a spider. Several Imperial cruisers floated nearby, completely unaware of the human vessel sliding between them. "We are in optimal position," Maria reported. "Strike teams ready." Greg took a deep breath. "For Amy," he said quietly, then louder. "Launch strike teams, begin phase 1. From the belly of the Vengeance, 4 smaller craft silently deployed. Each carried a team of specially trained soldiers equipped with the newest human technology. They headed for different sections of the outpost, while the Vengeance positioned itself behind one of the Imperial cruisers. "Activate phase shift weapons," Greg ordered. "Target the cruiser's engine section." The Vengeance's main cannon hummed to life, emitting a beam of energy that constantly shifted frequencies. When it struck the Imperial cruiser's shields, it didn't bounce off or get absorbed. Instead, it slipped through as if the shields weren't even there, slicing into the engine section with surgical precision. The Imperial cruiser's lights flickered and died before its crew even realized they were under attack. "Strike teams report successful boarding," Maria announced. "Minimal resistance, they were completely unprepared." On the Imperial outpost, Governor Zarketh was giving a speech to his assembled officers when the lights suddenly went out. Emergency. Systems kicked in a moment later, bathing the Grand Hall in red light. "What is the meaning of this?" the governor demanded. His species resembled large humanoid felines with amber eyes that narrowed in anger. "Get security in here immediately." The doors to the hall burst open, but instead of Imperial security forces, human soldiers in advanced combat suits entered. Their weapons were trained on the Imperial officers. "Governor Zarketh," said the leader of the strike team, "in the name of humanity, you are now our prisoner." Outside, the battle had already ended before it truly began. The Vengeance had disabled 3 Imperial cruisers using the phase shift weapons, and the strike teams had captured the outpost's communications center and weapons control. Not a single human life had been lost. Commander Wilson entered the Grand Hall an hour later, looking at the assembled Imperial officials with cold eyes. "I am Commander Greg Wilson of the Earth Defense Fleet," he announced. "This outpost is now under human control." Governor Zarketh snarled, his fur standing on end. "This is an act of suicide. Do you primitives have any idea what forces you've just provoked? The Empire will reduce your homeworld to ash for this." Greg approached the governor slowly. 1 month ago, an Imperial official ordered the execution of a human woman named Amy Peterson. Her only crime was recording a diplomatic meeting. The Empire called her death necessary discipline. We call it murder. He turned to address all the prisoners. "Today we demonstrate that humanity will not be disciplined. We will not be treated as lesser beings, and we will not stand by while our people are killed." Governor Zarketh laughed despite his situation. "You've captured 1 outpost. The Empire controls millions of worlds. This is less than an insect bite to us." "Check your communications," Greg suggested calmly. The governor's aide whispered something in his ear, and the governor's expression changed from disdain to shock. At that exact moment, coordinated human strikes had hit 17 other Imperial installations across the border region. Each attack had been precisely planned, targeting communication hubs, supply depots, and command centers, and each had succeeded completely. "Impossible," Zarketh whispered. "You've spent 10,000 years believing nobody could challenge you," Greg said. "You've become predictable, stagnant. Humans have spent our entire history fighting, adapting, and overcoming impossible odds. You killed one of us thinking there would be no consequences. You were wrong." Greg nodded to his soldiers, who began setting up equipment around the hall. "What are you doing?" the governor demanded. "Sending a message," Greg replied. "To your emperor and to every human colony. This outpost will be stripped of all useful technology and then destroyed. You and your officers will be transported to Earth as prisoners of war, to be treated according to human conventions of warfare, something your empire might want to learn about." Within 24 hours, news of the human attacks spread across the galaxy. Imperial citizens who had never even heard of humans suddenly found themselves watching footage of Imperial ships disabled by seemingly primitive vessels. The Empire's official response was to dismiss the attacks as minor incidents that would be swiftly addressed. But among the other subjugated species of the Empire, whispers began. If humans could strike the Empire and succeed, perhaps it wasn't as invincible as everyone had been led to believe. On Earth, Admiral Wright received Commander Wilson's report with grim satisfaction. The first phase of humanity's response had been successful beyond their most optimistic projections. But she knew the real fight was just beginning. The Empire would not take this humiliation lightly. They would respond with overwhelming force, as they had done to countless rebellious species before. The difference was humans were expecting it, and they were ready. The Imperial response came 3 months after humanity's first strike. A massive fleet of warships emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of human space. 500 vessels, each one larger than anything humans had ever built, formed a wall of metal and energy that blotted out the stars behind them. Admiral Susan Wright stood on the bridge of the Earth flagship Defiance, watching the tactical display with steady eyes. Her gray hair was pulled back tightly, her uniform crisp despite the fact she hadn't slept in nearly 48 hours. "They're here," she said simply. Around her, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency. No one showed fear, though they all felt it. The Imperial Armada was led by Grand Admiral Hex Malor, the most decorated military commander in the Empire's long history. His reputation for crushing rebellions was legendary, and he had never known defeat. "All defense platforms report ready," her second-in-command reported. "The colony evacuation is at 97% completion." Susan nodded. When intelligence had first detected the gathering Imperial fleet, she had ordered all outer colonies evacuated. Some people had resisted, not wanting to leave their homes, but the footage of Amy Peterson's casual execution had been a powerful reminder of what was at stake. "Open a channel to all Earth forces," Susan ordered. The communications officer nodded, and a small light indicated she was being broadcast to every human ship and station. "This is Admiral Wright," she began, her voice calm and determined. "The moment we have prepared for has arrived. The Empire has sent its best against us, believing they will crush us quickly and completely. They expect us to fear them. They expect us to surrender." She paused, looking at the faces of her bridge crew. "But they don't understand what it means to be human. Throughout our history, we have faced enemies who were stronger, more numerous, better equipped, and we have prevailed through innovation, determination, and courage." The Imperial fleet began to move, spreading out in a classic encirclement pattern. On Susan's tactical display, she could see the first wave of fighters launching. "Remember your training. Remember our plan. And remember Amy Peterson, whose death the Empire thought would teach us submission, but instead taught us resolve. Right out." Across human space, Colonel Diane Lee and her Special Forces teams were already in motion. While the main Imperial fleet approached the well-defended human colonies, her smaller, faster ships slipped behind enemy lines. Their mission was critical: disrupt Imperial supply chains, sabotage communication relays, and gather intelligence. Diane's ship, the Shadow, moved silently through an asteroid field near an Imperial supply depot. Her dark eyes narrowed as she studied the sensor readings. "Perfect," she murmured. "They've thinned out their defenses here just as we predicted. All ships in position?" Her communications officer nodded. "Yes, Colonel. Strike teams ready." "Begin operation," Diane ordered. As the Empire launched its massive assault on human colonies, it didn't realize that its own supply lines were being systematically cut by human special forces. The Empire's size, usually its greatest strength, became a weakness as it struggled to coordinate across vast distances with compromised communications. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Andy Phillips flew his fighter toward the massive Imperial battleship that had just destroyed the defense platform protecting his home colony. His family had been evacuated days earlier, but the sight of Imperial weapons firing on the place where he grew up filled him with cold fury. "Phoenix Squadron, form up," he said to his fellow pilots. "Target the section Dr. Moore identified." 6 human fighters, much smaller than their Imperial counterparts, dodged through the battlefield. Imperial gunners struggled to track them. The human ships moved in unpredictable patterns, using maneuvers no Imperial pilot had ever seen before. "Remember, hit the junction between the main hull and the command tower," Andy reminded his squadron. "That's where the shield generators overlap and create a frequency gap." The human fighters fired their phase shifter missiles directly at the weak point. The Imperial battleship's shields flickered but held. until the seventh missile slipped through the momentary gap and struck the hull directly. A chain reaction spread across the battleship's shield grid, causing cascading failures that left entire sections exposed. Human capital ships immediately concentrated their fire on these vulnerable areas. The Imperial battleship, a vessel that had stood unchallenged for 2 centuries, broke apart under the combined human assault. On his flagship, Grand Admiral Hex Malor received the news with disbelief. The tall, gray-skinned Imperial slammed his 6-fingered hand on the tactical display. "Impossible! How are these primitives defeating our best ships?" he demanded. His tactical officer, visibly nervous, replied, "Admiral, they appear to have identified weaknesses in our shield configurations. They're using weapons that shift phase faster than our systems can adapt." "And why?" Hex Malor asked dangerously. "Have we not updated our shields in response?" "The systems would require a complete redesign, Admiral. They've been standardized across the fleet for over 1,000 years. Our engineers say it would take months to implement changes." Hex Malor realized with growing horror what had happened. The Empire's technological stagnation, hidden by centuries of unchallenged dominance, was being exposed by an enemy that evolved and adapted at frightening speed. Still, numbers were on the Empire's side. For every Imperial ship the humans destroyed, they lost 3 of their own. The battle raged across multiple star systems, with losses mounting on both sides. At Earth's Defense Headquarters, Chief Engineer Kevin Morris worked frantically with his team, adapting captured Imperial technology to human systems. The middle-aged engineer hadn't slept in days, his eyes red-rimmed but focused as he modified a captured Imperial power core. "This is going to work," he muttered to himself as he connected the alien technology to a human defense grid. It has to work. The impromptu hybrid system hummed to life, boosting Earth's planetary shields to twice their previous strength, just in time to absorb the concentrated fire from 3 Imperial dreadnoughts that had broken through the outer defenses. The battle for the Sol system lasted 7 days. 7 days of continuous fighting, of desperate heroism and terrible losses. Human ships used hit-and-run tactics against the larger Imperial vessels. Colonial militias fought hand-to-hand against Imperial boarding parties. Scientists and engineers worked around the clock, adapting and improving their weapons as they learned more about Imperial systems. When the fighting finally paused, nearly half of humanity's fleet had been destroyed. 2 smaller colonies had been lost entirely. But Earth still stood, its defenses battered but intact. And the Imperial fleet, for the first time in its long history, had failed to crush a rebellion in its first assault. Grand Admiral Hex Malor stood before the holographic image of Emperor Zenthalos, his head bowed in shame. "The humans fight like nothing we have encountered before, Your Immortal Majesty," he reported. "They identified weaknesses in our systems that have gone unnoticed for centuries. They do not fight according to any recognizable doctrine. Each time we adapt to their tactics, they change them." The Emperor's glowing eyes narrowed. "You mean to tell me that primitives who have barely left their home planet have fought the Imperial fleet to a standstill? I have withdrawn to regroup and repair, Your Majesty. I request reinforcements and updated technology to counter their innovations." The Emperor was silent for a long moment. "You shall have them, and Admiral. This rebellion ends now. I authorize the use of the planet-killer weapons. Show these humans the true cost of defiance." On Earth, Admiral Wright surveyed the damage reports with a heavy heart. The victory had come at terrible cost. But as she watched the Imperial fleet withdraw, something like hope began to grow. Humanity had survived the first wave. They had proven they could hurt the Empire. And now they knew exactly what they were fighting. The war had truly begun. Special Forces Commander Jack Miller looked out the viewport of his stealth ship as they approached the Imperial throne world of Nexus Prime. The planet glowed with the light of 1 trillion structures, home to the oldest and most powerful civilization in the known galaxy, and somehow Jack and his small team were going to infiltrate it. "Are you sure this will work?" he asked Dr. Olivia Moore, who sat beside him checking her equipment. "The theory is sound," she replied, pushing her glasses up her nose. "My analysis of Imperial technology shows their central command network has a fundamental vulnerability. They built their entire system on the assumption that no one could ever reach this planet. Arrogance is their greatest weakness. Jack nodded. 6 months had passed since the Imperial fleet's failed assault on Earth. 6 months of brutal fighting across human space. 3 colonies had been completely destroyed by the Empire's planet-killer weapons before humanity found a way to detect and intercept them. Millions had died, but humans had refused to surrender. Now they were bringing the fight to the very heart of the Empire. "Time to final approach?" Jack asked his pilot. 20 minutes, Commander," she responded. "Imperial security grid hasn't detected us yet." Jack turned to face his team, 12 of humanity's best soldiers, scientists, and hackers. Among them was Laura Peterson, Amy's older sister. She had joined Earth's military the day after Amy's murder, driven by a cold determination that had caught the attention of Special Forces recruiters. "Everyone remember why we're here," Jack said. "This isn't about revenge, it's about survival. If Dr. Moore's plan works, we can end this war today with minimal additional bloodshed." Laura's eyes met his. "It can be about both," she said quietly. Back on Earth, President Ryan Carter sat in the underground command center, surrounded by military and civilian advisors. The large screen before them showed the position of Jack's ship as it approached Nexus Prime. "Any word from our allies?" she asked. Admiral Wright nodded. "The Crosian fleet is in position. The Zendari resistance fighters have sabotaged the Imperial shipyards in their sector. The Calvins are standing by to jam Imperial communications on our signal." This had been humanity's most surprising advantage, discovering that numerous species within the Empire harbored resentments and resistance movements. When humans demonstrated that the Empire could be hurt, these groups had cautiously reached out. What had begun as humanity's solitary fight for justice had evolved into something larger, a galaxy-wide push for freedom. Dr. Moore's voice came through the secure channel. "We've penetrated the outer security grid. Our Imperial identification codes were accepted." The stolen codes had come from captured Imperial officers. Combined with a ship designed to mimic Imperial energy signatures, they allowed the human team to approach the planet unchallenged. "Landing at target coordinates in 5 minutes, the pilot reported. The target was an access point to the vast computer network that controlled Imperial operations throughout the galaxy. Dr. Moore had discovered that despite its incredible complexity, the entire system operated on core programming that hadn't been fundamentally updated in millennia. Jack's team landed on a maintenance platform connected to a massive tower. Wearing stolen Imperial maintenance worker uniforms, they moved quickly through service corridors, avoiding the main areas where they might be spotted. "Security checkpoint ahead," whispered Sam Baker, their intelligence officer. 3 guards. Jack nodded to Laura, who moved forward with another team member. They approached the guards confidently, presenting falsified work orders on Imperial data tablets. As the guards examined the documents, Laura and her partner smoothly stunned them with concealed weapons. 30 minutes before the shift change," Sam warned. "We need to move fast." The team reached the central server hub, a vast chamber filled with technology beyond human understanding. Dr. Moore immediately went to work, connecting her specially designed interface to the Imperial systems. "This will take time," she said, her fingers flying across her portable console. "Their security protocols are extensive." "How much time?" Jack asked. 10 minutes, maybe 15. "You have 8, Jack replied, setting up defensive positions around the room. "Security will notice those guards are missing soon." On the other side of the planet, in the Imperial Palace, Emperor Zenthalos received a disturbing report. "Anomalous access detected in the central server hub," the Emperor repeated. His bioluminescent eyes narrowed. "Who would dare?" "Unknown. Your immortality," the security chief replied. "But the access patterns match those used during the human attacks on our border outposts." The Emperor rose from his crystalline throne. "Send all available forces to that location immediately. And prepare my personal guard. If humans have somehow reached Nexus Prime, I wish to see these creatures myself." In the server room, alarms suddenly blared. "They've detected us," Sam called out. "Imperial forces converging on our position." Dr. Moore didn't look up from her. For almost there, the virus is uploading to their central network. Once it spreads, it will create a backdoor we can exploit to shut down any Imperial system. Jack and his team took defensive positions at the entrances to the server room. Hold them off as long as possible. Laura, protect Dr. Moore. The first wave of Imperial guards rushed into the corridor. The human team's advanced weapons cut them down, but more kept coming. Server hub locked down, Dr. Moore finally announced. The virus is in their system. Admiral Wright can activate it remotely at any time. Fall back to extraction point, Jack ordered. Move. The team fought their way back toward their ship, taking losses as they went. When they finally reached the landing platform, only 7 of the original 12 remained. Laura had taken a hit to her shoulder but kept fighting. They were about to board their ship when a brilliant light flooded the platform. An Imperial shuttle descended, surrounding by floating guard drones. The hatch opened to reveal Emperor Zenthalos himself, his tall, slender form radiating power and ancient authority. "So these are humans," the Emperor said, his voice surprisingly deep. "The creatures who dared to challenge my empire." Jack stepped forward, placing himself between the Emperor and his team. "Your empire murdered one of our people and thought there would be no consequences. You were wrong." The Emperor studied him with glowing eyes. "Your species has caused more damage in 6 months than any rebellion in 10,000 years. Impressive, but ultimately futile." "Is it?" Jack asked. "Dr. Moore now." Dr. Moore activated her communication device. "Admiral, execute final protocol." Across the galaxy, Admiral Wright received the signal. "Activate the virus," she ordered. On thousands of Imperial worlds, Imperial ships, and Imperial stations, systems suddenly failed. Weapons went offline, shields collapsed, communications died. The virus spread through the Imperial network like wildfire, exploiting the standardization that had once been the Empire's strength. On the landing platform, the Emperor's guard drones fell from the sky as their control systems failed. "What have you done?" the Emperor demanded, his composure slipping for the first time. "We've given you a choice," Jack said. "Right now, every Imperial weapon system is offline. Your fleets are dead in space. Your planet killers can't fire. But we haven't destroyed your life support systems or your civilian infrastructure." Laura stepped forward, her injured arm held tight against her body. "I'm Laura Peterson. You killed my sister Amy. She was a communications officer who believed in peace. Her death started this war, and now her memory is going to end it." The Emperor looked from human to human, perhaps truly seeing them as equals for the first time. "What do you want?" "Recognition of human independence and sovereignty," Jack said. "Reparations for the colonies you destroyed, and a new galactic council where all species have equal representation." "Or?" the Emperor asked. "Or my team dies here, but the virus remains. Admiral Wright will shut down life support on this planet. Then the next, until someone in your empire is wise enough to accept our terms." For perhaps the first time in its existence, the Galactic Empire had no choice but to negotiate with those it had once considered beneath notice. 1 year later, representatives from 50 former Imperial subject species gathered on Earth for the signing of the Galactic Concordat. At the center of the new council chamber stood a statue, not of a general or an admiral, but of a junior communications officer named Amy Peterson, whose death had changed the galaxy forever. Beneath it was a simple inscription: one life, one spark, one fire that spread across the stars.